Jamunatira Manachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hari. Where is the book? Hmm?
Use a book, or you could use like a smart device.
Let me see the book. Thank you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Continuing reading from Śrimad Bhāgavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 23. This chapter is entitled Devahuti's Lamentation. And we are on text number 32. Is that right? 32? Shunyaradhyastata kancha Shunyaradhyastaya kancha Kanchanya Bahurenaya Kanchanya Bahuratnaya Harena cha Maharena, Harena cha Maharena, Ruchakena Chabushitam, Ruchakena Chabushitam, Shunyaraja Staya Kancha, Kanchanya Bahuratnaya, Harina cha Maharina, Ruchakena Chabushitam. Others? Ladies? Bahuratnaya. So, Harina cha Harina. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. About her hips, she wore a girdle of gold, set with numerous jewels, and she was further adorned with a precious pearl necklace and auspicious substances. Purport. Auspicious substances include saffron, kumkum, and sandalwood pulp. Before taking a bath, there are other auspicious substances such as turmeric mixed with mustard seed oil, which are smeared all over the body. All kinds of auspicious substances were used to bathe Devahuti from top to toe, from head to toe. Text number 33. Sudata Subhrava Slakshna Snigdha Pangena Chakshusha Padma Kosha Spriha Nirlai Alakaischa Lasanmukam. Translation. Her countenance shone with beautiful teeth and charming eyebrows. Her eyes, distinguished by lovely moist corners, defeated the beauty of lotus buds. Her face was surrounded by dark, curling tresses. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to Vedic culture, white teeth are very much appreciated. Also today. There's so many products out there to make sure your teeth are white. Anyway, Devahuti's white teeth increased the beauty of her face and made it look like a lotus flower. When a face is very attractive, the eyes are generally compared to lotus petals and the face to a lotus flower. Described when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu appeared 500 years ago, their eyes were like lotus petals. You know, big in the center and come down small. They were so attractive. Anyone who saw them, anyone who was fortunate enough to get a glimpse of them would be stunned by their beauty. You all have to excuse me, I've been nursing a cold for almost a week now. And it's like a Klingon. I'm trying everything to get rid of it, but it's taking its time. I can't sing, but I can talk a little bit. So, we'll read one more verse. Text number 34. Yada sasmara rishabam rishinam daitam patim tatra kaste sahastribi yatraste sa prajapati. Translation. When she taught of her great husband, who was the best of sages, Kardama Muni, who was very dear to her, she, along with all the maidservants, at once appeared where he was. Purport. It appears from this verse that in the beginning, Devahuti thought herself to be dirty and dressed in a very niggardly way. When her husband asked her to enter the lake, she saw the maidservants and they took care of her. Everything was done within the water. And as soon as she thought of her beloved husband Kardama, she was brought before him without delay. These are some of the powers attained by perfect yogis. They can immediately execute anything they desire. So Devahuti, husband was the great Kardama Muni. He was a great and powerful yogi, and Devahuti was also quite qualified to be his wife. But although she was the daughter of a king, when she married him, Kardama, he was living like a yogi in the forest, a very austere life. But she, because this was her husband, although she was accustomed to opulence in the palace, she lived the way he lived, very austerely, and she never complained. She never complained. And he appreciated that she, although very much accustomed to living in opulence and luxury, here she was living with him in the forest with practically nothing. So she became skinny, and it says here that she was dressed in a niggardly way, means poor. The clothes that she wore were old and worn out. But her husband, Kardama Muni, appreciated how surrendered she was. What a good wife she was, not making any demands. He decided on his own to reward her. And he being a big, great yogi, he possessed mystic power. And Prabhupada describes in the purport that being, he had attained perfection in yoga, anything he desired could be immediately executed. So he arranged for her to take bath, and these, I believe yesterday, someone said that the maid servants were like mermaids in the water, and they took her and cleaned her, scrubbed her, washed her properly, and then they decorated her, dressed her in new garments, and by the desire of Kardama, she was immediately present before him. So, in the yoga siddhis, perfections of yoga, Prabhupada describes there are anima, lagima, prapti, different siddhis of perfection. The real yogis will possess these siddhis, and they can do anything they want. Prabhupada tells the story of one yogi when he was young. This yogi he would ask his students, "What do you want to eat?" And he could manifest like pomegranates, even though there were no pomegranate trees around. But he had this power, he could bring it from wherever. And this will satisfy his students, disciples. So, of course, today, there are still some yogis in India, perhaps living in the Himalayas, but in general, the so-called yogis that one finds in the cities, they have no mystic siddhis. There was one, during Srila Prabhupada's time, there was one popular yogi. He would manifest a little piece of gold, a little nugget in his hand. And of course, the people thought this was extremely wonderful. They thought he was God. He also proclaimed himself to be God. But any person with a bit of knowledge could challenge him and say, "What is this manifestation of a little gold? What is that? It is nothing." But people in general, they are not educated sufficiently in Vedic knowledge. They can be easily fooled by some cheap tricks. So, and therefore they foolishly, blindly accept these so-called yogis. But Kardama Muni was not like that. Therefore, he was a great personality. Therefore, he could have a son who would be an incarnation. What's his name? Kapila. As soon as he had the son, he left and went back to his meditation, went back to his yoga. But he knew that his wife wanted to have a child, wanted to have a son. So he agreed. And this chapter will, as this chapter unfolds, we will see. In the next verse, text 35, Bhartur Purashtaratmanam Stri Sahasra Britam Tada Nishamya Tadjugi Yoga Gatim Samshayam Pratyapadyata. Translation. She was amazed to find herself surrounded by 1,000 maids in the presence of her husband and to witness his yogic power. Report. Devahuti saw that everything was miraculously done, yet when she was brought before her husband, she could understand that it was all due to his great yogic mystic power. She understood that nothing was impossible for a yogi like Kardama Muni. So continuing here in Bhāgavatam, we get to learn about a real yogi, not the cheap yogis who have no power, but here is someone who actually had mystic power. He could manifest 1,000 maid servants to look after his wife. And she herself, seeing all this, all the arrangements that was made to satisfy her by him, she could understand that he was such a powerful yogi. And without that, she didn't even have to ask for anything. He was satisfied that she was a submissive wife, and how she tolerated the hardships, life in the forest, and then he decided to reward her by using his mystic power. There was nothing, it seemed that nothing was impossible for him. That's the caliber of yogi that he was. So, such yogis existed long ago, but in the age of Kali, you cannot find such a yogi. But I remember Prabhupada was once asked by an Indian man, "Can you show me some mystic power, some magic?" And Prabhupada said, I have no mystic power, no magic. Because he was thinking that Prabhupada was the guru of so many disciples around the world. He thought maybe he's gotten these disciples by mystic power, by magic. But Prabhupada said, no, I have no magic. But if you want to see, why don't you see that these boys, these young boys, these disciples of mine, they have given up sex life. And they are following my orders, spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. That's magical. So, that he could do that. by his desire, by his teaching, and by his example, Prabhupada was able to inspire young men and women all over the world to give up material life and dedicate their lives to spiritual life. So this is a significant, you could say, significant magic, mystic power that, in Kali Yuga. And in these countries, especially outside of India, where Vedic culture was non-existent, where in fact when Prabhupada was coming to America, when he informed people in India, that was his plan, was to go to America and preach Krishna consciousness. Practically everyone was trying to advise him against doing that. Even the lady who eventually gave him free passage on the ship, on the Jaladuta, Srimati Moraji. Prabhupada was told, approach her. She's a Vaishnava, and she's pious and generous. Maybe she will give him. So Prabhupada approached her. Prabhupada wanted to come. The order of his Guru Maharaj was to go to the West and preach. But he had nothing. He had no money. So, but the words, the order of his spiritual master was fixed in his heart, and that was driving him. So when he approached her and he asked her for free passage, not on a passenger ship, but on a cargo ship. In other words, it was not a luxurious, like today you have all these huge luxury liner, big ships, you know. No, that's not how Prabhupada came. He asked for her to give him passage, free passage on a cargo ship. And she said, of course, I can give you that, but I don't want to. I can give you free passage, but I don't wish to. The Prabhupada said, why not? She said, because you're an old man. What are you going there for? You're going there to die? And what will you eat? As far as she knew, people in the Western countries, they eat meat, they drink, they take intoxication. You know, said, this is no place for a sadhu. Why are you going there? But Prabhupada was insistent. He said, yes, that never mind, but my order is to go here. So you can help me by giving me this free passage. She said, I'm sorry, but I cannot do it. So Prabhupada said, well, I'm not going until you give me this passage, free passage. So he went outside and he sat on a lawn outside of the building, just chanting japa. And the lady shook her head, and after some time she sent a servant out to see if that old sadhu is still there. And he came back and told her, yes, he's still there, he's just sitting chanting. And she thought, he is so stubborn, you know. But anyway, she figured he's going to give up and go. So she went about her business. But then after a few hours, the Lord in her heart made her think he must be hungry. So she sent some prasadam out for him. And Prabhupada accepted the prasadam, and he said, so are you going to give me the passage? And she just shook her head and thought, he is so stubborn, so determined. And she eventually gave in and said, all right, I'll give you passage on one of my cargo ships. So like that, Prabhupada came. And it wasn't easy. Most of you have read something from the Lila Amrita. Prabhupada was performing austerities practically greater than any yogi. In fact, one of my godbrothers was in India, and once an Indian sannyasi said, your guru, he didn't live like the traditional sannyasis. He's not performing austerities. And the devotee had to tell him, you have no idea. You know, you are living here in India where there's a system in place. You can go begging door to door and get food. People will give a sadhu anything. Always, you know, pious people, if you come to their door, they will give something. Prabhupada saw his father was like that any sadhu came to his home, even if they were not genuine, like a little bogus, still he preferred to, he thought the right thing was to give them something. So the devotee told this sannyasi that you're living here in India, there's a system in place for doing madhukari, and going begging door to door and so on. You can get chapatis and you can get this and that. But in America, there's nothing like that, you know. And so Prabhupada had to make do and figure out how he will live. For one whole year, he said sometimes I was homeless. But nothing stopped him. He knew, I have my mission and I will do anything. So sometimes somebody would allow him to stay in their place. Sometimes he stayed in the home of some crazy man who in the middle of the night tried to attack Prabhupada with a knife. He was tolerating so much just to give us Krishna consciousness. So we knew he's a real yogi. Although he wasn't making any show of yogic power, but we understood that he is a real yogi because he's fully surrendered to the master of all yoga. Krishna is known as the Yogeshwara. So one who becomes completely surrendered to him, there is nothing, all power is there. If you are surrendered to the one who is all powerful, you have nothing to desire. And so Prabhupada was going to countries that had never heard the name of Krishna. Going to countries that was communist countries where the people were atheist, demoniac. But he nothing stopped him. And when Krishna saw how dedicated, how surrendered he was, then Krishna began to shower him with all blessings. So everything, and Prabhupada says, I was seeing it happening, witnessing it, how Krishna is helping me. He could see the hand of Krishna working. And anything he wanted to do, Krishna was helping him. Because he was fixed on the order of his spiritual master. He said on his last meeting with Bhaktisiddhanta, Bhaktisiddhanta told him, if you get any money, print books and distribute them. So that was the foremost idea in Prabhupada's mind. And because he did like that, then everything else came. Temples, devotees, all around the world. But Prabhupada remained living like a yogi. Even though he had so many opulent temples around the world, some places the temples were castles. In France they have a castle. In Germany they had a castle. Still, Prabhupada, whatever opulence was coming, he remained living simple, like a yogi. He was given teaching by his example. He didn't change because the opulences came. Practically, Prabhupada was living out of a suitcase. It's not that his standard of living increased because he had so many temples, so many disciples and so on. No, he continued to live simple. And this endeared him to all his disciples. If Prabhupada went somewhere, to some temple that for the first time, and they picked him up with a Volkswagen car, he was satisfied with that. Somewhere else they would pick him up in a Rolls Royce, but he wouldn't get excited and enamored that, oh, now I have a Rolls Royce. During Prabhupada's time, there was one bogus yogi who had many followers, and he had a fleet of Rolls Royce, like 20 or 30 Rolls Royce cars. But what was he giving his students? Nothing. But Prabhupada, he lived simple, and whatever Krishna sent, he was satisfied with that. He never complained. He never demanded, why don't you get me a better car, a bigger car? No. There are so many wonderful stories of little anecdotes of how Prabhupada dealt, his dealings with his devotees. It was based on love. He loved his disciples, and his disciples loved him. One time Prabhupada came to San Francisco, and the devotees were thinking that we don't have good enough facility for him to stay in the temple. It's not very nice. So they rented a room in a fancy hotel. So when Prabhupada left the airport, and his car, of course, left first, and the other devotees, they had to go and find their car in the parking lot and then go. But when in the car that Prabhupada was driving, when they pulled up at the hotel, big fancy hotel, Prabhupada said, "What is this?" He said, "This is where you will stay, Prabhupada." He said, "Why? I don't want to stay here. I want to stay with the devotees." He said, "Well, what we have, the facility is not very good, Prabhupada." He said, "It doesn't matter. I want to stay with the devotees." And in this way, he was always showing how much devotee association is important. He said, if with the association of devotees, Krishna consciousness is easier to practice. If you go off on your own somewhere, then it may be difficult. And we've seen that. Sometimes people leave and they go far away, and they have difficulty maintaining themselves, maintaining the practice. So there's not much more I can say on this, but if anyone has any questions, we can try to, one or two questions, we can try to answer them. Prabhu?
It's very easy to understand what we need to do when we face distress, take shelter, Krishna more, simple.
Yeah.
But when opulence and honor, that seems to be more distracting than distress.
Seems to be. It's not that one cannot practice Krishna consciousness in opulence. No, one can be. There were the example in the past, there were great kings. They were called Raja Rishis or Rajarshis. Means king and rishi. So they lived in all the opulences, but they were completely devoted. So it's not that you have to be poor. We don't necessarily go looking to be poor. But it is easier if you live simple, no distraction. Because of our fallen condition, in opulences, then it's easy for us to be distracted and sidetracked. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, his first few temples, they were all like rented houses. It was very simple. And he told Prabhupada that when we were living in the rented house, our men were going out every day preaching and everything was nice. But since one rich man built this famous Bagh Bazaar temple in Calcutta, marble, at the time when that was given, that was, it was quite significant, And so, of all white marble temple, big, with many rooms. So Bhaktisiddhanta told Prabhupada, he said, since we've got this opulent temple, now our men are fighting with one another over which room they can stay in. Before, many were sharing one room, sleeping on the floor. But now that we have opulence, they're fighting over which room. He said, sometimes I think I should just take all the marble, strip all the marble out of the temple building and use it to print books. So Prabhupada heard these statements from his Guru Maharaj, and he understood what was the essence of Krishna consciousness. And so he wasn't looking for opulence. Whatever, like the first temple here in New York was the Matchless Gifts. It was a storefront. I think the first few temples in ISKCON were like that, storefronts or little houses. Devotees were simple, and they were satisfied. When I joined here in New York. Pancharatna was there. It was in Henry Street. Yeah, you think you're crowded now. In Henry Street, there was a 4-story brownstone building. And my first visit to the temple, I went there in the morning. They gave me prasadam and then engaged me in service. And they convinced me to stay the night and see what it's, experience Krishna consciousness. So when the night came, there was a big room in the Brahmachari ashram. Everybody was sleeping on the floor. There was no mats even, no beds, no mattresses, nothing. But everybody was blissful. But me, I was living with my mother and brother and sister. We had a nice apartment. But I spent the night, you could say I survived the night and the next morning. And when I left, my thinking was that Krishna consciousness is definitely the real thing. It's nice. I like everything. I like the chanting, the prasadam. Everything's nice. But I don't think I could live like those devotees. This is how I thought. I don't think I could live like them. It was so austere. But I couldn't help but notice, in spite of the austerities, they were blissful. The newspapers used to write that the devotees are bright-faced. And so this is how I thought. I'll keep coming, but I don't think I could live with them. And then something happened. And then Prabhupada happened. One Sunday, the Sunday feast, Prabhupada came, and this was the first time I got to hear him sit and hear him speak. And after Prabhupada's lecture, when I was going home, all I could think was, now I have to join. Now I have to move in the ashram. It seemed like, it wasn't like I had a personal conversation with him, but just sitting in the temple room and he and the Vyasa-san speaking, it became clear to me this is the right thing to do. And likewise, when I told all my friends and families I'm going to join, not one of them thought it was a good idea. They all tried to talk me out of it. But I was stubborn. I knew that this is the best thing, and nothing can take me away. Okay? So we can stop here. Grantaraj Śrimad Bhāgavatam. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Mm.